Spinning.
Jacob whimpered. "Mommy, it hurts." Emily, her leg twisted unnaturally, whispered, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here." Darkness enveloped them, and the forest swallowed their cries. Back in Lake Placid, alarm bells rang when Emily didn't return to work on Monday. Her neighbor reported her missing, and a search party was organized. Helicopters buzzed overhead, dogs sniffed the trails, volunteers combed the woods. Headlines blared, "Mother and son vanish in Adirondacks." Weeks turned to months, the search scaled back, hope fading. Emily's ex-husband flew in, distraught, blaming himself. The community held vigils, candles flickering in the night. Theories abounded: animal attack, foul play, or simply lost to the vast wilderness. But no trace was found, not even a footprint. The Adirondacks, with their 6 million acres of untamed land, had claimed them, or so it seemed. Emily's cabin stood empty, Jacob's toys gathering dust. The mountains kept their secret, the wind whispering through the pines as if mocking the searchers. And so, the disappearance became a local legend, a cautionary tale told around campfires. But deep in the ravine, buried under layers of earth and time, lay the truth, waiting to be unearthed. 2 years had passed since Emily and Jacob Harper vanished into the labyrinthine depths of the Adirondack Mountains, their disappearance etched into the collective memory of Lake Placid like a scar that refused to heal. The seasons had cycled through their relentless dance, winters burying the trails under heavy snow, springs coaxing wildflowers from the earth, summers humming with insects, and autumns painting the forest in fiery hues. The search for the mother and son had dwindled to a faint pulse, sustained only by a few dedicated volunteers and a local journalist, Clara Winters, who refused to let the story die. Clara, a wiry woman in her 40s with a penchant for dogged investigation, had covered the initial search in 2023, her articles in the Adirondack Daily Enterprise keeping the community's hope alive. But as leads dried up and the headlines faded, she turned her obsession into a personal mission, spending weekends hiking the high peaks, retracing Emily's possible routes, her notebook filled with maps, theories, and questions. She interviewed rangers, hunters, and even psychics, chasing whispers of clues that never materialized. The official report concluded that Emily and Jacob likely succumbed to the elements, hypothermia, starvation, or an accident in the rugged terrain, but Clara wasn't convinced. Something about the case gnawed at her, a gut feeling that there was more to the story than a tragic misstep in the wilderness. In October 2025, as the leaves turned crimson and gold once more, a hunter named Tom Brennan ventured into the High Peaks Wilderness area with his loyal German shepherd, Rusty. Tom, a grizzled man in his late 50s, was a lifelong outdoorsman who knew the Adirondacks like the back of his hand. He'd heard the stories of the missing Harpers, had even joined a search party back in 23, but like most, he'd come to accept they were gone forever. That morning, he was tracking a deer through a remote section of the forest, miles from any marked trail, when Rusty began acting strangely. The dog, usually disciplined and focused, started whining and pawing at the ground near a steep ravine. Tom, curious but cautious, followed Rusty's lead, his boots crunching through the carpet of fallen leaves. The ravine was overgrown with brambles and ferns, its depths shrouded in shadow. Rusty's nose was buried in the dirt, digging frantically, unearthing clumps of soil and roots. Tom knelt beside him, his heart pounding as Rusty uncovered something unnatural, a tattered piece of blue fabric, weathered but unmistakable. It was a shred of a backpack, and as Tom brushed away the dirt, he saw a glint of metal, a zipper, rusted but intact. His hands trembled as he dug deeper, revealing more of the pack, its contents spilling out like secrets long buried. There was a child's stuffed bear, its fur matted and faded, and a crumpled piece of paper with faded ink. Tom unfolded it carefully, his breath catching as he read the words, "Emily and Jacob Harper, lost in High Peaks. Help us." The realization hit him like a thunderbolt. This was no ordinary find. He marked the spot with a pile of stones, tied a red bandana to a nearby tree, and raced back to his truck to call the authorities. Within hours, the quiet ravine was transformed into a hive of activity. State police, park rangers, and forensic teams descended, their radios crackling with urgency. Clara Winters, tipped off by a contact in the sheriff's department, arrived with her camera and notebook, her pulse racing with a mix of dread and anticipation. The excavation was meticulous, each layer of earth peeled back with care. As the team worked, they uncovered more artifacts: a woman's hiking boot, a broken compass, a child's sneaker, its laces still tied. The items painted a grim picture, but it was Rusty's relentless digging that led to the most chilling discovery. Beneath a tangle of roots, the dog unearthed a small, weathered bone, unmistakably human. Gasps rippled through the team as they realized the gravity of the find. The bone was carefully bagged and the area cordoned off. Clara, standing at the edge of the tape, scribbled furiously, her mind racing with questions. Were these the remains of Emily and Jacob? How had they ended up in this remote ravine? The discovery reignited the town's grief and curiosity, drawing crowds to the trailhead, where news vans parked and reporters speculated wildly. Social media buzzed with posts on X, some claiming the Harpers had been attacked by a bear, others whispering of foul play or supernatural forces in the mountains. Clara sifted through these rumors, her journalistic instincts sharpened by years of chasing truth. She interviewed Tom, who recounted Rusty's behavior with a mix of pride and unease. "That dog knew something was down there," he said, scratching Rusty's ears. Like he could smell their story. The forensic team worked through the night, their floodlights casting eerie shadows on the ravine walls. By dawn, they had recovered more bones, fragments of a skull, a femur, a tiny ribcage that made Clara's heart ache. The remains were too degraded to identify on site, but the backpack and note were damning evidence. DNA testing would confirm the identities, but the town already knew. Emily's ex-husband, Michael, was contacted in Syracuse, his voice breaking over the phone as he agreed to provide samples for comparison. The community held its breath, torn between closure and the pain of reopened wounds. Clara, meanwhile, dug into the case with renewed vigor, revisiting Emily's life for clues. She learned Emily had been struggling financially, her freelance work barely covering the bills. Had she taken a riskier route to save money on a guide? Clara also uncovered a detail the initial investigation had overlooked. Emily had been researching old mining trails in the Adirondacks, paths rarely used and poorly mapped. Could she have followed one, seeking a shortcut or a hidden gem, only to lose her way? The ravine, Clara noted, was near an abandoned iron mine, its entrance long collapsed, but its tunnels rumored to snake beneath the mountains. She wondered if Emily and Jacob had stumbled into a dangerous area, perhaps a sinkhole or an unstable slope. As the forensic team continued their work, they found traces of charcoal and melted plastic, suggesting a small fire, perhaps Emily's attempt to keep warm. The evidence pointed to a desperate struggle for survival, but no signs of violence or foul play emerged. Clara's mind spun with possibilities. Had they fallen into the ravine during the storm? Had they been injured, unable to climb out? The note suggested Emily was still alive when she wrote it, but for how long? The discovery of the remains brought a flood of memories to Lake Placid. Jacob's laughter at the town fair, Emily's quiet smile as she sketched at the coffee shop. Vigils resumed, candles glowing in the crisp October air. Clara sat in her car one night, staring at the ravine, her laptop open to a draft of her next article. She typed, "The Adirondacks have given up their secret, but not their mystery." The truth was close, yet still elusive, hidden in the bones and the earth. As the forensic team meticulously cataloged the remains and artifacts from the ravine, the small town of Lake Placid buzzed with a renewed sense of urgency and sorrow, the autumn winds carrying whispers of the long-lost Harpers through the streets lined with quaint shops and historic lodges. The bones, fragile and weathered by 2 years of exposure to the elements, were transported under heavy guard to the state lab in Albany, where pathologists donned white coats and masks to begin the painstaking process of identification and analysis. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead forensic anthropologist, a woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for unraveling the dead secrets, oversaw the operation. She laid out the skeletal fragments on sterile tables under bright fluorescent lights, piecing together the puzzle like an archaeologist unearthing ancient relics. The adult skeleton showed signs of a female in her early 30s, matching Emily's age, with a healed fracture in the right arm from a childhood accident, a detail pulled from her medical records. The child's bones were smaller, delicate, consistent with an 8-year-old boy, and a dental comparison from Jacob's last checkup confirmed the heartbreaking truth. DNA samples, extracted from the marrow and compared to Michael's cheek swab, sealed the deal. 99.9% match. The news broke like a dam bursting, flooding the media with headlines that screamed closure, but stirred only more pain. Clara Winters, ever the relentless journalist, was there at the press conference, her recorder capturing every word from the sheriff's somber announcement. The remains have been positively identified as Emily Harper and her son, Jacob, he said, his voice steady but eyes betraying the toll. The cause of death was ruled as exposure and injuries from a fall, with no evidence of foul play, but Clara's instincts prickled. Why the ravine? Why so far off the trail? She delved deeper, requesting access to the autopsy reports under Freedom of Information laws. What she found buried in the details sent chills down her spine. Emily's remains showed signs of malnutrition and hypothermia, but there was something else, a series of scratches on her arms, defensive perhaps, and a fractured skull that suggested more than a simple tumble. Jacob's bones bore similar marks, tiny fractures in his ribs as if from a crushing embrace or impact. Dr. Vasquez noted in her report that the positioning of the skeletons indicated Emily had likely held Jacob protectively as they fell or were buried. But buried. That word lingered. The earth in the ravine had been disturbed not just by natural erosion but by what appeared to be deliberate covering, layers of leaves and soil compacted over time, yet with anomalies like animal scavenging minimal, as if the site had been concealed. Clara interviewed experts on Adirondack wildlife. Bears or coyotes should have scattered the remains, but they were relatively intact, clustered together. This anomaly fueled online forums and X threads, where users speculated wildly. #Harper Mystery trended, with posts ranging from conspiracy theories about a serial killer in the woods to supernatural tales of forest spirits claiming wanderers. One user, at Adirondack Truth, claimed to have seen strange lights in the high peaks around the time of the disappearance, linking it to old Native American legends of the mountains swallowing the lost. Clara followed these leads, using her network to track down posters, but most were armchair detectives with no real evidence. Back in the lab, technicians analyzed the backpack's contents. The stuffed bear, Mr. Whiskers, bore traces of blood. Emily's, from a cut perhaps, and the note, written in fading ink on a torn page from a sketchbook, revealed more under UV light. Hidden words emerged. Storm, lost, heard voices, not alone? The phrase, not alone, ignited a firestorm. Had someone else been in the woods? Emily's ex-husband, Michael, arrived in town, his face gaunt from grief, staying at a local inn where he pored over old photos of Jacob's birthdays and Emily's smiles. He met with Clara, tears streaming as he confessed regrets. The divorce had been acrimonious, custody battles, leaving scars. She was a good mother, he said, but she had her demons. Depression, you know? I should have been there. Clara probed gently. Had Emily mentioned any threats? Any stalkers? Michael shook his head, but recalled an odd phone call weeks before the trip, Emily sounding paranoid about someone watching her cabin. Was it her imagination? Or something real? Clara cross-referenced police records. There had been a report of a break-in at Emily's home a month prior, dismissed as raccoons, but now it seemed suspicious. She hiked back to the ravine with a ranger, the air crisp with pine and decay, examining the site anew. Tire tracks?
No.
Footprints? Erased by time. But near the abandoned mine entrance, partially collapsed with warning signs faded and overgrown, she found a rusted tool, a pickaxe half buried, not native to the area. Carbon dating would later show it was recent, perhaps from the 2020s. Who had been mining here? The Adirondacks had a history of illegal prospecting, gold fever lingering from the 1800s, but this felt personal. Clara's article, Unearthed Secrets, where the Harpers alone, hit the presses, stirring the pot. Locals whispered about a reclusive hermit, Old Man Silas, who lived off-grid in the high peaks, known for chasing off hikers with his shotgun. Had he encountered Emily and Jacob? Clara tracked him down, a arduous trek to his ramshackle cabin, where the grizzled man, beard to his chest, denied everything. "Ain't seen no one," he grumbled, but his eyes darted nervously. Pressed, he admitted hearing cries in the storm 2 years back, but thought it was animals. Clara didn't buy it. She noticed fresh earth turn near his shed, as if something buried. Reporting this to authorities, a search warrant was issued, but Silas vanished before they arrived, his cabin empty save for a map with the ravine circled in red. The plot thickened. Was Silas involved? Or a red herring? As winter approached, snow beginning to dust the peaks, the investigation shifted gears. Divers explored nearby lakes for more evidence, finding nothing, while ground-penetrating radars scanned the ravine, revealing no other bodies but anomalies in the soil, perhaps old mine shafts. Clara, bundled in layers, sat by her fireplace, piecing together timelines. Emily's research into mining trails, the note's hidden message, Silas's map. It pointed to something deliberate, not accidental. Michael's alibi for the disappearance weekend checked out. He was in Syracuse, but Clara wondered about accomplices. The community, meanwhile, rallied for a memorial, planning a service at the trailhead with lanterns released into the night sky. Jacob's school friends, now 10, shared stories of his love for adventure, while Emily's art adorned the town hall. Yet closure felt incomplete, the mountains still holding cards close. Clara typed late into the night, her story evolving. The Harpers didn't just vanish. They were led, or lured, into the depths. With the disappearance of Old Man Silas sending shockwaves through the investigation, the authorities escalated their efforts, declaring him a person of interest in the Harper case and plastering his weathered face on wanted posters across upstate New York, while Clara Winters, fueled by a potent mix of adrenaline and caffeine, chased down every thread that could unravel the mystery buried in the Adirondack ravine. Silas, whose real name was Elijah Crow, had a murky past that Clara uncovered through dusty county records and late-night calls to former acquaintances. Born in the 1950s, he'd served time in the 80s for poaching and assault, then vanished into the wilderness, emerging sporadically to trade furs and herbs in Lake Placid's back alleys. Locals painted him as a ghost of the mountains, a survivalist who knew hidden caves and forgotten paths better than any ranger, whispering tales of his encounters with lost hikers. Some he helped, others he allegedly scared off with wild stories of curses and creatures. Clara, poring over his abandoned cabin with permission from the sheriff, found relics that chilled her. A collection of old maps annotated with red X's marking ravines and mine shafts, a journal filled with cryptic entries about intruders in my domain, dated around the time of Emily's hike, and a rusted locket containing a faded photo of a woman and child, eerily similar to Emily and Jacob, but from decades earlier. Was it coincidence or a pattern? The locket's engraving read, "Forever Mine, 1972, prompting Clara to dig into missing persons cases from that era. She discovered an unsolved vanishing of a mother and daughter near the same High Peaks area, dismissed as a hiking accident, but with whispers of a hermit's involvement. Connecting dots, Clara hypothesized Silas might be a serial offender, preying on vulnerable wanderers in his self-proclaimed territory. Meanwhile, the forensic team delved deeper into the remains, using advanced techniques like isotopic analysis to trace Emily and Jacob's last meals, berries and stream water consistent with survival foraging, and 3D reconstruction of the skull fractures, which suggested a blunt force impact, possibly from a fall but with irregularities hinting at a strike from a tool like the pickaxe Clara had found. The pickaxe itself yielded fingerprints, partial and degraded, but a match came back to Silas from his old prison records. Bingo! An APB was issued, helicopters thumping over the treetops. 9 units like rusty sniffing trails that led to dead ends in the dense undergrowth. Clara, not content to wait, enlisted a local guide, a burly ex-Marine named Hank who knew the backcountry, and they trekked to the circled spots on Silas's map, discovering hidden caches of supplies, canned goods, tarps, and oddly, children's toys from the 70s, weathered but preserved. One cache held a diary page torn from Emily's sketchbook, smudged with dirt but legible. Saw a man in the fog. He offered help, but his eyes wrong. Jacob scared. Running now. The revelation exploded in Clara's mind. Emily and Jacob hadn't just gotten lost. They'd encountered Silas, perhaps accepted aid that turned sinister. Theories swirled. Did he lead them to the ravine, push them in during a struggle? Or was it an accident, Silas burying them out of panic? Michael's arrival added layers. He revealed Emily had an old connection to the Adirondacks. Her grandmother was the woman in the 1972 case, a detail Emily had mentioned in passing but never pursued. Had she been researching family history, unwittingly crossing Silas's path? Clara's ex-posts under her journalist handle went viral. #FindSilas trending with users sharing sightings from Maine to Pennsylvania. One credible lead pointing to a sighting at a remote gas station, Silas filling up an old truck with jerry cans. Authorities raided the location, finding the truck abandoned, its bed stained with what tests confirmed as human blood, Emily's type. The chase intensified, Clara embedding with the search team, her boots muddy from days in the field, interviewing trackers who spoke of Silas's evasion tactics, like false trails and booby traps. In a dramatic turn, a ranger triggered a snare, twisting his ankle, delaying the pursuit. Clara's articles evolved from factual reports to gripping narratives, detailing the psychological profile she commissioned from a criminologist. Silas as a territorial recluse with possible antisocial personality disorder, triggered by intruders. Community forums buzzed, some defending Silas as a harmless eccentric, others recounting creepy encounters. As Thanksgiving approached, snow blanketing the peaks, a breakthrough came via a tip from a hunter, Silas holed up in an old mine shaft. SWAT teams descended, flashbangs echoing in the tunnels, but Silas was gone, leaving behind a message scratched into the wall. The mountains keep what they take. Clara, staring at the words, felt a shiver. Poetic justice or a taunt? The investigation pivoted to underground networks, literally and figuratively, with spelunkers mapping forgotten mines where Silas might hide. Emily's friends came forward with new info. She'd confided fears of being followed before the trip, attributing it to paranoia from her meds, but now it seemed real. Jacob's teacher recalled him drawing a scary man in the woods weeks prior, dismissed as imagination. Piecing it all, Clara theorized Silas had been watching Emily's cabin, drawn by her resemblance to his lost love from 72. Perhaps the locket's owner was his mother or sister, fueling a delusional obsession. The blood in the truck suggested transport, maybe post-fall, Silas attempting aid but failing, then covering up. Or worse, intentional harm. As December's chill set in, the case gripped the nation. True crime podcasts dissecting every angle, Clara guesting on one, her voice steady. This isn't just about finding Silas. It's about justice for Emily and Jacob, and perhaps others lost to the shadows. The mountains, silent witnesses, held more secrets, but Clara vowed to expose them, one revelation at a time. The hunt for Elijah Crow, alias Old Man Silas, transformed the serene Adirondack wilderness into a theater of high-stakes pursuit, with law enforcement agencies from the New York State Police to the FBI converging on the high peaks like a swarm of determined hornets, their helicopters slicing through the crisp winter air and ground teams crunching through fresh snow in a relentless grid search that spanned hundreds of square miles. Clara Winters, now a central figure in the unfolding drama, traded her notebook for a satellite phone and embedded deeper with the task force, her journalistic objectivity blurring into a personal crusade as she pieced together Silas's fragmented life story from archived documents and reluctant informants. Born in a remote cabin during a blizzard in 1954, Silas had endured a childhood marred by tragedy, his mother and younger sister vanishing in 1972 during a hike, their bodies never found. fueling rumors of paternal abuse that drove young Elijah into the army, where he served in Vietnam, returning haunted by PTSD and a distrust of society that led him to the mountains' embrace. Clara uncovered military records showing Silas's expertise in survival tactics, booby traps, and silent takedowns, skills that explained his evasion thus far. As teams closed in on a suspected hideout, an overgrown bunker near an old logging road, a tense standoff ensued when Silas was spotted through thermal imaging, hunkered down with a rifle, his voice crackling over a commandeered radio. "You don't understand. The mountains demand sacrifice." Negotiators, including a psychologist specializing in reclusive personalities, talked him down over hours, promising answers about his family, until Silas emerged, hands raised, his beard frosted with ice, eyes wild but resigned. Cuffed and transported to Albany for interrogation, Silas's confessions poured out in a rambling torrent, recorded on video that Clara later reviewed under strict embargo. He admitted encountering Emily and Jacob during the storm, drawn by their cries echoing through the fog-shrouded ravine. At first, he claimed benevolence, offering shelter in his cabin, sharing venison stew and warming them by a fire crackling with pine logs. But as Emily grew suspicious, noticing the locket resembling her grandmother's photo, which Silas revealed was from his own lost kin, tensions escalated. Emily, piecing together family lore her grandmother had whispered about a mad mountain man who harassed them in 72, confronted Silas, accusing him of past sins. In a fit of rage or panic, Silas lunged, the struggle spilling out into the night, where Emily grabbed the pickaxe in self-defense, swinging wildly before they tumbled into the ravine, Silas following in pursuit. He insisted the fall was accidental, that he buried them shallowly out of guilt, marking the spot on his map as a twisted memorial. But forensics contradicted parts. The blood in his truck suggested transport after injury, and tool marks on the bones hinted at post-mortem tampering, perhaps to obscure evidence. Silas wept during questioning, muttering about echoes of the past, claiming Emily's resemblance to his sister triggered hallucinations, blending timelines in his fractured mind. Clara, attending the press briefing post-arrest, grilled the DA on charges, manslaughter, tampering with evidence, possibly murder if intent proved, while digging into the 1972 case anew. Archival dives revealed Silas's father as the prime suspect back then, but with no body, no charges stuck. Silas, then 18, had alibied him, perhaps covering up. Psychological evaluations diagnosed Silas with severe dissociative disorder, his sacrifices a delusional ritual to appease the mountains he personified as vengeful spirits. The revelation sent ripples. Were there more victims? Ground radar sweeps of marked map spots unearthed 2 more sets of remains, one matching the 1972 duo, confirmed by DNA from Silas's sample, closing a 53-year cold case. The other, a lone hiker from 1998, bones bearing similar fractures. Headlines blared, Adirondack's serial hermit exposed, with Clara's in-death series winning accolades, but she felt hollow, interviewing Silas in jail, where he philosophized about solitude's cost. Michael, Emily's ex, found bittersweet closure, suing for access to Silas's assets, meager but including land deeds, to fund a memorial park. Jacob's school erected a playground in his honor, swings creaking like echoes of his laughter. Yet loose ends nagged. Silas denied killing his family, insisting his father did, but the patriarch long dead, truth buried. Clara hiked the ravine one last time, snowflakes dancing, pondering how isolation breeds monsters or merely amplifies inner demons. The community healed slowly, tourism dipping then rebounding with mystery tours, but rangers warned of real dangers: weather, wildlife, and the human element. As spring thawed the peaks, Silas's trial loomed, his defense claiming insanity, prosecutors pushing for life. Clara testified, her words measured. Silas didn't just take lives, he stole peace from the mountains. The case, a tapestry of tragedies spanning generations, underscored the Adirondacks' dual nature, beauty and peril intertwined. In the crisp autumn air of upstate New York, where the Adirondack Mountains rose like ancient guardians cloaked in vibrant foliage of red, orange, and gold, lived Emily Harper and her young son, Jacob. Emily was a 32-year-old single mother, her life a delicate balance of work as a freelance graphic designer and the joys and challenges of raising a curious 8-year-old boy. Jacob, with his mop of curly brown hair and eyes that sparkled like the mountain streams, was the light of her world. He had a boundless energy, always asking questions about the world around him. Why do leaves change color? How do birds know where to fly south? Emily cherished these moments, often turning them into little adventures. Their home was a cozy cabin on the outskirts of Lake Placid, a small town nestled in the heart of the Adirondacks, where the community was tight-knit and everyone knew each other's stories. Emily had moved there 5 years ago after a messy divorce from Jacob's father, seeking solace in the wilderness that promised peace and renewal. The mountains had become their playground. Weekends were spent hiking trails like the one up Mount Marcy or picnicking by Saranac Lake, where Jacob would skip stones and Emily would sketch the landscapes that inspired her designs. But beneath the serene surface, Emily carried a quiet burden, a lingering anxiety from her past, whispers of depression that she fought with therapy and medication, though she never let it show to Jacob. She wanted him to see only strength and love. One fateful October weekend in 2023, Emily decided to embark on a special trip with Jacob to celebrate his birthday. She planned a camping adventure in the remote High Peaks Wilderness area, a place known for its rugged beauty and challenging hikes. "It's going to be our best adventure yet," she told him as they packed their backpacks with tents, sleeping bags, trail mix, and Jacob's favorite stuffed bear, Mr. Whiskers. Jacob was thrilled, bouncing with excitement as they loaded up their old Subaru and drove deeper into the forest. The drive was filled with songs on the radio and games of I Spy, spotting deer and eagles along the way. They arrived at the trailhead as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows through the pines. Emily parked the car, shouldered her pack, and took Jacob's hand. "Remember, stick close to mommy, okay? The woods are full of wonders, but we have to be careful." Jacob nodded solemnly, his small hand gripping hers tightly. As they set off on the trail toward Avalanche Lake, the air grew cooler and the sounds of civilization faded, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the distant call of loons. Emily felt a sense of freedom, a release from the daily grind, but as the path narrowed and the trees closed in, a subtle unease crept in. Jacob chattered endlessly about building a fort and roasting marshmallows, oblivious to the gathering clouds overhead. They hiked for hours, stopping for water breaks and to admire waterfalls cascading over moss-covered rocks. By dusk, they reached a secluded campsite near a babbling brook, where Emily pitched the tent with practiced ease while Jacob collected sticks for a fire. Dinner was simple, hot dogs over the flames, s'mores for dessert, and as night fell, they lay under the stars, Emily pointing out constellations like Orion and the Big Dipper. "See that one? That's the North Star. It always guides you home," she whispered. Jacob fell asleep in her arms, his breathing steady and peaceful. But Emily couldn't shake a strange feeling, as if the forest was watching them. In the middle of the night, a sudden storm rolled in, thunder rumbling like distant artillery, lightning flashing across the sky. Rain pounded the tent, and Jacob woke up crying, frightened by the noise. Emily held him close, singing lullabies to calm him, but the wind howled fiercely, shaking the trees. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the ground muddy and the air heavy with mist. Emily decided to press on with their hike, wanting to reach the summit for the panoramic view she promised Jacob. They packed up and continued, but the trail was slick, and Jacob slipped once, scraping his knee. Emily bandaged it, kissing it better, but her worry grew. As the day wore on, they ventured off the main path to explore a side trail Emily had read about in a guidebook, one that led to a hidden meadow. "It'll be our secret spot," she said, trying to keep spirits high. But the meadow never appeared, and soon they were lost in a thicket of underbrush. Panic set in slowly for Emily. She checked her compass, but it spun erratically, perhaps due to magnetic interference from the mountains. Her phone had no signal, the bars mockingly absent. Jacob sensed her tension and started to whine. "Mommy, I'm tired. I want to go home." Emily reassured him. "We're almost there, buddy. Just a little further." But as hours turned into the afternoon, they wandered deeper into the wilderness, the trees seeming to close ranks behind them. Exhaustion set in, and they stopped to rest by a fallen log. Emily rationed their snacks, her mind racing with thoughts of rescue. She fired a flare from her emergency kit, but it fizzled in the damp air. Night fell again, colder this time, and they huddled together under a makeshift shelter of branches. Emily's thoughts turned dark. What if no one found them? She had told a neighbor about their trip, but not the exact location. Jacob cried himself to sleep, and Emily stayed awake, listening to the nocturnal sounds, owls hooting, wolves howling in the distance. Days blurred as they tried to find their way back, surviving on berries and stream water, Emily's knowledge from survival books keeping them alive. Jacob grew weaker, his questions turning to pleas. Emily's determination wavered, but her love for her son fueled her. On the fourth day, they stumbled upon an old abandoned cabin, its roof caved in but walls still standing. Inside, they found shelter from another storm, but no food or tools. Emily scrawled a note on a scrap of paper. "Emily and Jacob Harper, lost in high peaks. Help us." She tucked it into Jacob's backpack. As the sun set, a fog rolled in, thick and disorienting. In the haze, Emily thought she heard voices, rescuers perhaps, and she called out, grabbing Jacob and running toward the sound. But it was a trick of the wind, and in the confusion, they plunged into a ravine, tumbling down steep slopes covered in leaves and rocks. Emily shielded Jacob with her body, bruises and cuts accumulating. At the bottom, they lay stunned, the world. As the trial of Elijah Crow commenced in the Albany courthouse under a slate-gray sky heavy with impending snow, the courtroom buzzed with a tense anticipation that mirrored the stormy atmosphere outside, drawing spectators from across the state. Journalists like Clara Winters scribbling furiously in the front row, family members of past victims clutching tissues, and curious locals bundled in wool coats whispering about the mountain monster finally caged. The prosecution, led by a sharp-suited DA named Rebecca Lang, painted Silas as a calculating predator whose delusions masked a lifetime of violence, presenting evidence like the blood-stained truck, the incriminating maps, and the forensic matches on the pickaxe that linked him directly to the ravine. Lang's opening statement was a masterclass in narrative, recounting how Emily Harper, seeking a birthday adventure for her son Jacob, stumbled into Silas's twisted world, her notes hidden plea not alone, now interpreted as a desperate warning of his presence. Defense attorney Marcus Hale countered with a portrait of a broken man, ravaged by war trauma and familial loss, arguing diminished capacity. Silas's confessions, he claimed, were the ravings of a mind fractured by isolation, not malice. Expert witnesses paraded, psychiatrists diagnosing schizoaffective disorder, explaining how Vietnam flashbacks blended with mountain folklore to create hallucinatory sacrifices, forensic pathologists detailing the remains, confirming the falls as primary cause but acknowledging post-fall interference, and Clara herself, testifying on her discoveries. Her voice steady as she described the Lockett's connection to 1972, suggesting intergenerational trauma rather than serial intent. Silas, shackled and subdued in an ill-fitting suit, stared vacantly at the floor during proceedings, occasionally muttering about the peak's judgment, his outbursts prompting recesses and heightening the drama. Outside, media frenzy peaked, X feeds exploding with hashtag Justice for Harpers, live streams from courthouse steps where protesters held signs reading, and the mountain myths and countergroups advocated for mental health reform. Clara's ongoing series delved into Silas's backstory, interviewing Vietnam vets who recalled his unit's horrors, ambushes in jungles that echoed the Adirondacks' dense thickets, and a distant cousin who revealed Silas's father's abusive reign, beating the family until the 1972 hike that was likely an escape attempt gone fatal, Silas perhaps complicit in covering it up. The trial unearthed more victims, A 1985 camper whose disappearance matched a Mapex, bones later exhumed bearing Silas's DNA on a cloth fragment. Lang hammered this pattern, territorial killings disguised as accidents, while Hale invoked sympathy, playing audio of Silas's interrogation where he sobbed, "I tried to save them like I couldn't save her," referring to his sister. Michael Harper took the stand, his testimony raw. "Emily was my light, Jacob my future. This man stole them." Cross-examination probed his divorce, hinting at Emily's instability, but Michael stood firm, redirecting blame to Silas's lurking. Jacob's drawings, entered as exhibits, showed a shadowy figure in trees, childish lines now ominous. As weeks dragged, snow piling outside, jury deliberations loomed after closing arguments, Lang's impassioned plea for accountability, Hale's call for compassion. The verdict came on a frigid February day, guilty of manslaughter for Emily and Jacob, murder for the 1972 kin, extrapolated from confessions, and lesser charges for others, sentencing to life without parole. Silas, emotionless, was led away, whispering, "The mountains win." Appeals filed immediately, but closure settled like fresh snow. Clara's book deal followed, Shadows of the Peaks, chronicling the saga, royalties funding wilderness safety programs, GPS mandates, ranger increases. Lake Placid erected a monument at the trailhead, a bronze mother and child gazing at the horizon, inscribed, "Lost but remembered." Michael remarried, starting a foundation for missing persons. The Adirondacks, ever enigmatic, welcomed hikers anew, but with cautionary tales of Silas echoing in guides. Clara, hiking solo one spring, reflected on humanity's fragility, the line between victim and villain blurred by circumstance. The case, a cautionary epic, reminded all that in nature's vastness, secrets linger, waiting for a dog's dig or a journalist's persistence to bring light. With Elijah Crow's conviction sealing a chapter of grief and intrigue in the Adirondacks, Lake Placid and the surrounding communities exhaled a collective sigh, though the scars of the Harper tragedy and Silas's long shadow lingered like the persistent mists that clung to the high peaks. Clara Winters, now a household name after her book, Shadows of the Peaks, climbed bestseller lists, found herself both celebrated and haunted, her nights plagued by dreams of ravines and whispered pleas, pushing her to question whether justice had truly been served or if the mountains still held untold truths. The trial's aftermath saw the town transform, not just in its tightened trail regulations, mandatory check-ins, GPS trackers, and ranger-led workshops, but in its psyche, with residents torn between preserving the wilderness's allure and confronting its dangers. The bronze monument of Emily and Jacob at the trailhead became a pilgrimage site, adorned with flowers and handwritten notes, a silent testament to love's endurance and loss's sting. Michael Harper, channeling his grief, expanded his foundation, Harper's Hope, funding search and rescue tech and scholarships for Jacob's classmates, while his new wife, Sarah, organized community hikes to reclaim the trails from fear. Clara, meanwhile, pursued lingering questions, her journalist's instincts unquenched by the verdict. She revisited Silas in prison, his eyes hollow but lucid, where he spoke cryptically of others who know the peak's secrets, hinting at accomplices or copycats. This spurred her to investigate historical disappearances, uncovering a dozen cases since the 1950s linked to unmapped mine shafts, some marked on Silas's maps, others not. She collaborated with geologists and cavers, using drones to scan inaccessible areas, finding collapsed tunnels, but no new remains. Yet, one discovery, a hidden cave with carvings of animals and dates back to the 1800s, suggested Silas wasn't the first to treat the mountains as a sacred or sinister domain, tying into Native American lore of spirits guarding the land. X platforms buzzed with hashtag Adirondack Secrets, users crowdsourcing clues, some claiming sightings of shadowy figures on trails, others sharing old tales of miners gone mad. Clara's articles evolved into a podcast, Echoes of the Lost, blending interviews with rangers, survivors, and psychics who claimed visions of Emily's final moments, huddled with Jacob, singing to calm his fears as cold set in. Forensic reanalysis, prompted by Clara's findings, confirmed Silas's tampering but found no third-party DNA, weakening accomplice theories, though a ranger's off-record tip about transient poachers in 2023 kept her digging. The community, meanwhile, held annual vigils, lanterns floating skyward. While schools taught wilderness safety, Jacob's drawings now part of curricula on intuition and danger. Clara's book tour took her nationwide, but she always returned to the Adirondacks, hiking the high peaks alone, her recorder capturing wind's whispers, seeking closure not just for Emily and Jacob, but for Silas's earlier victims, whose families she met, their stories mirroring Michael's pain. A breakthrough came in late 2025. A hiker found a rusted knife near another of Silas's map X's, etched with initials EC, possibly Silas's father, Elijah Sr., reigniting debate over his role in the 1972 vanishings. No charges could be filed against a dead man, but Clara's exposé linked the knife to a 1960s hunting catalog, suggesting a generational cycle of violence. Silas, informed in prison, remained silent, his appeals failing as public sympathy waned. The Adirondacks, ever majestic, saw tourism rebound, but with a new reverence. Hikers carried whistles, guides recounted the Harper tale as a caution. Clara, now mentoring young journalists, stood by the monument one dusk, her breath visible in the chill, reflecting on how truth, like the mountains, is vast, layered, and never fully conquered. The case closed, but its echoes, grief, resilience, mystery, resounded, a reminder that in the wild, every step carries a story, and some are unearthed only by time, tenacity, or a dog's relentless digging.